All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This is VCI's May webinar. I'm excited to be joined by a very unique set of participants, some of whom you've not heard from before, that have very unique workflows that enable the kinds of equity-related concerns to implementing a digital first technology using paper and plastic. So we'll be welcoming and joined by colleagues from Vaxxus. We'll get an update from our colleagues in Louisiana with the LA Wallet. We'll have an update from our colleagues in Oregon, as well as a broader technical update to round things out. I'm Brian Anderson. I'm MITRE's Chief Digital Health Physician, and I'm going to be your MC and provide a few opening remarks on where we're at with VCI since we last came to you. So over the past several weeks to months, we've certainly entered into what we're hoping is a new phase of the pandemic. We've seen certainly across the board many states here in the U.S. Lift mandates, mask mandates, lift certain requirements around vaccines needed for entry into restaurants or large capacity venues. And we've been seeing that as the early signs of potential new variants and new waves potentially emerging right here, frankly, in the Northeast, as well as in other spots of the US. So there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of where all this is going. All of that is to be said, though, that within VCI, we are still committed to the concept of empowering individuals with verifiable clinical information, which I'd like to share is now our new name. VCI, as you initially were part of this community, certainly appreciated the initial use case was absolutely about vaccination credentials and enabling individuals to have trustworthy versions or copy credentials of their vaccine record. And that's a very important part of their clinical record, of their health record. As we've grown VCI's community, to include over 23 states and 2 territories, multiple nations, multiple tech vendors. There are a number of additional use cases, and certainly as we look to the future and the new normal that we're entering into in this stage of uncertainty, we've appreciated in VCI that there's an opportunity to take the work being done with smart health cards and grow it beyond the initial use case around vaccination credentials into more of the kinds of verifiable clinical information that are important to all of us as part of our health record. And so you hear us refer more to that concept of verifiable clinical information later on in the technical update and in future webinars. We are committed to ensuring individuals have the ability to have verifiable copies of all parts of their health record, be it immunization records or other parts. And so we are working through a set of use cases. We'll look to expand that and looking forward to partnering with many of you on those use cases and taking those steps together in our very vibrant VCI community. So thank you so much again for joining us, and we look forward to that journey with you. If you can go ahead and advance the slide, Tom. One more. So one of the updates I also wanted to share was VCI's partnership with the Association for State and Territorial Health Officers, or ASHTO. ASHTO puts on annually a tech expo where they showcase and help the secretaries of health and many of the leaders across all of the public health agencies here in the United States and our surrounding territories to understand the kind of innovation that is going on. And certainly coming right out of the pandemic, a lot of the innovation that had happened and understanding how to make use of that in a sustainable manner in the new normal that we're all entering into. And so VCI was honored and privileged to participate in the Tech Expo as one of the primary sponsors and supporters of that organization. We had representatives who keynoted both the opening and the ending of the show, and a wonderful set of panelists that joined throughout, really highlighting the work done in the kinds of wonderful partnerships and collaboration across so many of the states represented here on this call, as well as part of the AASHTO community as well. So we are incredibly thankful for the opportunity to partner with AASHTO, with the Secretaries of Health of so many of the US states, and certainly look forward to building out those additional use cases that I've been describing as we look to expand beyond just COVID vaccines to other vaccines, to non-COVID vaccines. One of the things that we announced at the Tech Expo, if you didn't have the chance to tune in, was the World Health Organization, the WHO, and the group of 20 countries, the G20, have agreed to partner together in a pilot. This pilot looks to pull together all of the major specifications and standards used for vaccination credentials in the COVID space. So the 4 major standards include smart health cards, the European Union Digital COVID Certificate, or the EU's DCC, the DIVOC standard, which is really spearheaded by India, as well as the ICAO VDS standard, which is spearheaded by the United Nations, Australia, and several of the Pacific Rim nations. So those 4 standards are coming together in partnership with the World Health Organization and the G20 leadership, led by the presidency this year of Indonesia. Next year it will be India, to launch a pilot that will create an international framework for these 4 specifications in all of the member states that they represent across the world, to enable the kind of mutual recognition or mutual reissuance of the certificates for the purposes of international travel and international business. So VCI has been asked to participate in that. We're very excited for many of our community members to be able to participate in a pilot alongside the European Union and nations like India or the United Kingdom, or other nations represented in the G20. So much more to come on that. That will be launching formally, I believe, next month. And we're, again, very excited to be partnering, certainly with a number of the states that have already signed up to participate in that. And so more to come publicly on that. Go ahead and advance the slide. All right, well, so now I'm going to pass the ball to my colleagues over in Oregon. And Liz, take it away.
Great, thank you so much. Hello, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Liz Hunt. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a technology project manager for the COVID Response and Recovery Unit within the Oregon Health Authority. Happy to be here today as a representative from the team from Oregon who's worked on the My Electronic Vaccine Card project and share our story with you. So next slide, please. Great. And before we dive in too much to this, I do want to call out Oregon was very fortunate to have the opportunity to build and expand on the work that both California and Washington had done. So starting last fall, we began meeting regularly with California and Washington, who were extremely supportive and instrumental in our website development. So as you've all heard from both of them before, I believe on this call, California started and developed kind of this base code, but then Washington was able to create the first fork-in and take off with their own launch of a digital vaccine record. And then finally, this spring, I know we worked off of that as well. So huge thanks to them for that partnership. In Oregon, though, as we built on that, we really had a framework and a focus on leading with equity. We had 3 guiding principles, so listed on the slide, and those include our language access, accessibility, and centering community voices. Specific to language access, it was critical to us that we rolled out our app in all of our languages simultaneously. We were looking at 13 languages that we've made all of our COVID-19 materials available in. And it was super important to us as well that we looked at the language within the application and made sure we reviewed it for things like plain language and equity focus. And a lot of our work involved taking community feedback, and you'll see in a few slides, we did a lot of user acceptance testing with community to make sure the language we were using really resonated with folks and made sure our message was clear. We also worked with native speakers. We didn't do any auto-generated translations. And not only do we have our translations completed by native speakers, but then we actually followed up and had them review it within the context of the app. Both accessibility and community engagement, I'm going to dive into a bit more on the next slides, but you can see a couple of our guiding principles here. You know, we really wanted to conform with WCAG 2.1 AA. So that stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And we also, this was the first for us in Oregon, we brought on a team of native assistive tech users to actually work alongside us as we were rolling this out and complete that testing on the application. And then community engagement, we'll talk about in the next slide. So go ahead to the next slide, please. All right, so our community outreach and engagement was really central to our tool development. So we involved community in each step in every phase of our project. So you can see kind of phase one is where we started before we even decided to move forward with this. We met with community groups and we met with them and we talked to them and we said, okay, what are the perceived benefits and burdens that you can see if we move forward with this type of tool in our state? And that was really important to us so that we could listen to those concerns and ensure that the plan we had for moving forward would address those and make sure that we could work in partnership with our community. Moving into our second phase was our feedback phase, and that was our demo and listening sessions, community testing and feedback, and you can see that's expanded out, and I apologize, it looks like this slide got a little jumbled as it translated over to this presentation, but the crux of it's still here. You can see we had 10 community testers, so those were individual sessions we did one-on-one with community members through our UAT process, our user acceptance testing, where we met with them and we walked them through our test environment. We gave them personas. We said, okay, pretend your name is, so-and-so, and you landed on this website. What do you do? What do you see? Do you know what to do here? Would you want to use this website? Why or why not? What makes sense to you? What doesn't? And so that was really important for us to make sure that what we were building was something that was useful and would be helpful to people. So throughout all those individual sessions, we got our feedback from community, we cataloged it into an action log, and then we were able to make those changes prior to moving ahead with our production build. Many of these changes were related to usability. So where things are located on the web page, and clarifying instructions or simplifying the language we used. Some things we thought were really clear for folks turned out that line just confused them, and it was better if we just took it out. We did have one major change that came kind of about later in the process, and that resulted in us actually delaying our rollout by about a month. And that was when community partners during one of our listening sessions raised some concerns about the name of the website being a deterrent for some people to use the tool. So at that point, we actually paused our launch plans and we stopped and we worked with our community partners to come up with a new name, got that approved, and then made all those updates to the application. So that did set us behind about a month, but it was very important to us. And it was essential that we were honoring our commitment to center community voices. And it was really in line with what the Oregon Health Authority has rolled out now in our current phase of the pandemic, which is our RISE framework. And that's resilience and supportive equity. So ensuring that we're not throwing things out without working with our community. Our next phase was our launch support. So we met with individual business groups as well as a lot of our community-based organizations. So we worked with them to make sure they understood what the tool was, they felt comfortable with it, and that the materials that we were going to be putting out there to inform the public about the tool, that they were culturally appropriate and accessible to individuals. And then lastly, our post-launch, that's our phase we're in right now. We've got a closeout session planned in the coming weeks with our community testers, and we've continued our partnerships with community groups and responding to feedback. So one thing that Oregon rolled out earlier in the pandemic was a COVID feedback app. And so we were able to actually put several links within our My Electronic Vaccine Card app to that feedback app. So we're able to get real-time feedback from folks, find out if there's pain points, what's working, what's not, and make sure that we're able to address that in a timely manner. You want to go to the next slide, please? All right, and so now I'd like to talk a little bit more about accessibility. The goal here was to make sure that our website was accessible to individuals with disabilities. So for example, color blindness, vision disability, hearing disabilities, and even motor disabilities, such that the experience that they would have navigating the website is the same experience or an even easier experience than others might have. So lots of work went into this, and key strategies here, we engaged early. We brought aboard an accessibility consultant. We built a team of native assistive tech users, and we really had a partnership with our developers. So instead of putting it out there and then looking at the end to kind of retrofit, this was something that was hand in hand with each step of the process. Each of our sprint cycles looked at accessibility and made sure the features we were adding and components that we were working on were being designed in an accessible way and not accessibility as an afterthought. So you can see on this slide, we had 3 different individuals that we worked with. So 2 native assistive technology users, and in that grid, you can see all the different types of technology that they use that we were able to test our application with. In our accomplishments, you can see, we have 15 different personas, and so personas are those user personas where we think about who the people are that we're trying to serve, and we really made sure that we focused and highlighted disability and communities who's been disproportionately impacted by COVID in our personas to make sure that we were designing for them. We know smart health cards are already out there. We know lots of individuals already have access to them in other means in Oregon. And because we took a slower, longer approach to this, we wanted to make sure that what we rolled out could truly be used by individuals who might not have access to these types of smart health cards through, their electronic health record or providers. We had 114 user stories that we put in our functional design document that were focused on accessibility. And we completed an accessibility conformance report. And so we went through all those web content accessibility guidelines, and we've documented exactly how we've supported one that we weren't quite able to support and the ones that weren't applicable. The last thing on this slide here is that, we noted too that what was really exciting about this project is that we were able to drive some change by some other private technology companies. So we know smart health cards, right? We're the ones, we're one of the issuers, we're putting one out, but then people are also using them within wallets and other applications. And during our testing and our creation, we were able to find some concerns and issues there. And we're pleased to say that, we had 2 different companies who were able to make changes and roll out new updates to their apps that we were able to identify to now make those more accessible for everyone who uses smart health cards. So that was really exciting. I'll go over one example of an accessibility improvement we made, and that was our error messages. So with error messages, it's really important that things are specific. Focus can be linked to the element exactly where the correction is needed. So what I mean by that, so you're completing a form, and we'll look at what our application looks like in a minute. But when you're completing a form, you hit submit and you get an error. If you don't know what that error is, if you don't know where you need to be on the screen, that's not useful. And I know many of us have had that experience. And now imagine you're someone who's using assistive technology. Maybe you have low or you have no vision. You're not actually able to see the screen. If the error message isn't, being linked to the exact form and focus, so you don't know where it is, what needs to be changed, and the message itself isn't specific, then you can be stuck and you might not even be able to complete the form. So really working through that, especially with our screen reader user, and making sure that the way we had this laid out, so there were no kind of, stop points where an individual would just be unable to complete it. That was something that was really important to us. All right, next slide, please. Now we can kind of take a look at what our application looks and feels like. So again, if you're familiar with California or Washington's site, ours is very similar. So on the left, you can see the top of the page. We have our header showing all of our different languages that we've made our application available in. And then the copy that's at the top of our page is kind of our simplified version of our instructions on what it's here for. I will call out, we do have a how-to video that's available end-to-end in both English and Spanish, and then our captions are provided in all of our other languages up on YouTube. So you can always go check that out if you'd like. And then we also, one of the feedback we got from our usability testing was to make sure we actually linked to the other places. So if we're unable to support vaccine records, from outside of our state, to make sure we link to those other resources for folks. So that's something we added in here. Then on the right, you can see our form. And again, just like California and Washington's, we just ask for first name, last name, date of birth, contact info, and then a PIN number. And then if you want to go to the next slide, once someone submits that form, they'll get a link to their QR code, either via email or text, whichever contact info they provided. And then after they enter their PIN, they'll land on the screen with their QR code. So you can see on the left, this is what that screen looks like. This is in our test environment, so this is not a real person. You can see we have a menu of options then for what users can do with that. So they can save to device, they can send via email, and we also have our print option. So these additional options, this was part of our the code expansion we made. And so I'll start even with the save to device one. So when a user clicks on that, one of the things we did is made sure that our download option had an accessible PDF. And so I keep talking about accessibility, but this was so important. So if a user who uses a screen reader downloads an image, there's no way for them to know what's really in that image. So by making this an accessible PDF, we're making sure that the end user truly has access to their information. And so what do I mean by that? It's okay, so I'm someone who's downloaded this. Now I have an accessible PDF. I'm someone who maybe has low vision or no vision. Now when I open up this PDF, I can use my screen reader and actually move through the page and read what it says. So if you are someone who is using this type of assistive technology and you downloaded a couple of these, maybe you have children, a spouse, with images, you would have no way of knowing which one was really which and what it actually said necessarily. So it was really important to us that we made sure this information was accessible to give people control over their own information. Let's see, we also have our send via email option, so people could send it to a spouse or just a caretaker via email right from our web application. And then a print option, so you could print it out. And then within that print option, we also have the ability for folks who may not have access to a printer to actually request that we print it out and mail it to them. So that was, again, one of the things that that was raised from our community is they wanted to make sure that individuals who might not be able to carry around smart devices, cell phones and the like, that they still had an opportunity to use this type of tool. And so you can see on the screen that is what our accessible PDF looks like. And it's designed to also be tri-folded so it can fit in that envelope, so the QR code always doesn't get creased. So that's what it would look like when it's printed or saved to a device as a PDF. All right, I can go to the next slide, please. And on this slide, we have some of our early results. So we went live on April 25th. We went live with the tweet about 2 weeks ago. So you can see our tweet over there from our comms team announcing our new website. We followed that up with a Facebook post, and then we continued communications through our COVID-19 comms channels. As of May 16th, earlier this week, we had over 40,000 successful record requests, and the web app had already been used in 10 of our 13 languages, which we're really proud of. We've had requests for 33 mailed copies, and over 8,000 accessible PDFs have been downloaded. You want to go to the last slide. And on this last slide, I just wanted to, again, focus on the updates that we made to the code, and most importantly, that we've been able to share back from the other states. So as I mentioned, this has been a tremendous partnership with both Washington and California, and we're so fortunate and glad that we're able to share back a lot of the work that we've done. So specifically, those things would be our additional QR code delivery options, so the options to email, print, or request a mailed copy. Our language review, we think we've done a lot of good work in simplifying our copy and making sure our instructions are easy to understand. And then with accessibility, with all the work we've done with accessibility, we do have all of that logged with the different criteria and the types of improvements and enhancements that we've made to ensure that this technology is something that can be accessed by all types of users across our state. So really proud of that and excited to see the other states who are looking at picking up some of that work. And that's all for me. This was my last slide. So thank you all for letting me share with you today.
Liz, thanks so much for going over that. And I think it's a real testimony to the collaborative work that I know that you've done. I was part of some of those calls with you and Mr. Nickerson and the Oregon team, alongside colleagues from Washington and California. It was really something special to see you guys come together to do all that. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Next up, we have our colleagues from LA Wallet. I'll remind people that one of the first states in the nation to roll out a smart health card was the state of Louisiana via the LA Wallet. So Sarah, it's been almost a year since I think we last had you guys on and celebrated the launch of smart health cards in Louisiana. So looking forward to hearing an update on where you guys have taken this.
Yes, it's been a heck of a year with LA Wallet. You know, the health cards have been heavily used, and we've expanded the app to include things like wildlife and fisheries, your hunting and fishing licenses, and we're adding more and more features to LA Wallet. You know, it seems on a monthly basis now. So it's been a heck of a year. But as you mentioned, my name is Sarah Kelly. I'm the project manager here for LA Wallet. And I'm just going to show you kind of what we've done this year. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So, you know, as you mentioned, we were the first state to release the smart health card. It was released with a connection to the Louisiana Department of Health's vaccination database. All the providers dump their vaccinations into this database. And so it's kind of the master state database for vaccinations. And so that's our kind of source of truth for our vaccination records. It does use the driver's license that you've linked to the app, because LA Wallet was originally Louisiana's digital driver's license app. It's, like I said, it expanded to be more now, but that's kind of the starting point is you load your driver's license or state ID. So it uses the information that's on your ID to match your credential to you, your health card credential to you. And it's on this smart health standard, so it has that verifiable QR code. Go ahead to the next slide. So at the beginning of this year, we expanded the smart health card to include COVID-19 test results. We partnered with Orion Laboratories, whose offices are like right over there. I can almost see them. They provide testing at all the community testing sites around the state with the Department of Health, and they've got a drive-through. And so we partnered with them to build this feature, but it's open for other labs if they were wanting to put their results in as well. We have it set to where it can work with multiple labs. And so the data for those test results come directly from the laboratory. There's no option to manually add your test results, so it's a truly trusted and verifiable data source. The QR codes have been updated to include those test results. So now when you scan your Smart Health QR code, it returns both the vaccines and your test results if you have any. So, and the app, it's very easy to read the results. It lets the results stay in for a certain period of time. So you can display your positive result for, say, 90 days. Some places were letting you get into a location if you were positive within the past 30 or 60 days in lieu of a vaccine, so that there's it gives people options to work with. You can go to the next slide. So one of the great things about standards is compatibility for other applications. So LA Wallet, we are compatible with Apple Health, super easy to load it into your Apple Health, Clear, and any other app that uses the standard, the Smart Health standard. In fact, Clear actually recently contacted us. They said majority of the people in Louisiana are using LA Wallet for their vaccine records. What's going on with that? Wanted to know more. And since then, they've updated their app to include LA Wallet as one of the listed options when you upload your vaccine. Go to the next slide. So the first iteration of our vaccine card went live May 2021. By July, out of the 755,000 or so users that we had in the app, about 140,000 of them had a Smart Health card. Next slide. By August, the mayor of New Orleans made an announcement for a vaccine mandate, required to be vaccinated or to have a negative test to pretty much get into anywhere in New Orleans. That's the Superdome, that's Mardi Gras, that's everything. And then she says, everybody go download LA Wallet because it's easy to have on your phone. And we didn't know that was going to happen, that she was going to make that announcement. But when she did, we added probably over 100,000 users to the app in a matter of a couple days. Next slide. So the truth is, having an easily accessible, trusted, verifiable vaccine card on your phone allowed all those places to open up to increase capacity. They can move more people through the door more quickly because it was easy to see, easy to display, easy to share. And as you know, you'll forget your wallet, but you will turn your car around if you forgot your phone, right? So go to the next slide. So today we have double the users that we had last July. We have 1.4 million active unique users. That's unique people, not multiple accounts or whatever. That's unique licenses activated in the account. And that's 60% of Louisiana's driving population. That's a lot of people. And of those 1.4 million, we have over 825,000 of them have their Smart Health cards loaded. Next slide. So following the mandate, we met with officials from like the Saints and the Superdome and other places to discuss ways to help speed up process of verifying so many people at one time. In fact, the Saints were requiring that everyone who had access to the field should be vaccinated. That's the coaches, the staff, the marching bands for the halftime shows. And that brought up a need to provide a service to verify vaccinations, both in person and remotely. So LA Wallet already has a built-in scanner that can verify driver's licenses, both physical or digital. So we updated this to verify Smart Health cards. Additionally, we incorporated the health cards into our remote verification service. So this allows a company to batch verify both identities and vaccination status for a group of people with their permission, of course. So say the Saints could send a link to a list of rosters for the marching band, and the users would open that link on their phone and say, yes, I approve sending my vaccination status to the Saints, and it would allow them to be cleared to get access, to pre-clear them for access to the field. So stuff like that was super useful. Restaurants in New Orleans loved having a service that they could scan the cards. because they have an audit log that they can access on the online portal, and it would prove that they were in compliance with the mandates. If somebody questioned if they were following the mandates, they could show that they were. Okay, next slide. So of course, nothing is without challenges. We quickly realized there are a lot of common issues that users were experiencing, things like, I got my vaccine done out of state, or I did it at the VA and they won't release it, or their names wouldn't match because their driver's license has their married name, but their vaccine record is from before they were married, so it has their maiden name on it, and so it couldn't match the record. So we worked with the Department of Health and we built a health card assistance feature in the app. It allows the user to kind of navigate those common issues, and you kind of ask you some questions and it gives you recommendations on how to get those things resolved. And at the end of the day, if you already went through those steps and still having trouble, it allows you to even take a photo of your vaccine record and send it to LDH, and they'll verify it and they'll correct the data in the master database for you so that it can be matched. Well, this process and the support things can be such a headache for the front lines of the support team. It does come with an added benefit of cleaning up years of bad data and inconsistencies. So next slide. So what's next? So this is some exciting stuff that we actually have coming out within the week, or maybe next week or the week after, called dependent health cards. So this is going to allow parents to add their children or other dependents vaccinations to their account. You can have multiple health cards in the app for people that you are the guardian for. So the users will have a form that they'll enter their child's information, name, birthday, zip code, just identifying information. And then what it will do is it'll locate the record at the Department of Health, and then it will look at the guardian line on that record and see if it matches the driver's license you're using for the app. If it does, then it'll allow you to add that person's record. So this is also useful for, people who take care of their elderly parents or whatever. They would just need to go to their healthcare provider and have them marked as a guardian on that person's record so that they could hold their information in their phone as well. So every health card will have the QR code. So just tap the button, it'll show it. And then you can, so if you're traveling and you need to show it, you can just tap it, scan, and just, swipe through them very quickly and easily, instead of having to dig out all the different cards. And you can click, looking to the future, as restrictions are being lifted and the pandemic is kind of slowly evolving, we've had some early discussions about adding things like flu vaccines to the health card, medical examiners' credentials, and those things would be super useful for those in healthcare to be able to just show their credentials easily off their phone, not have to dig out cards or papers that got lost, and just be able to get into hospitals, wherever they need to go to get to work, right? So that's next slide. So that's about all I have today. But I did want to mention, LA Wallet is, not just health cards, it's a full solution that's growing. We're looking at vehicle registrations and concealed carry licenses and all kinds of things. It's going to be it is a full service solution it's very useful for our citizens in the state. So we are listed in the Azure Marketplace, and we are available for other states who are looking to implement this solution. So feel free to look for us there in the Azure Marketplace, or shoot me an email and reach out. We'd be happy to talk. If you have any questions, just pop them in the chat or shoot me an email. That's it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Sarah. I actually have a question. So, one of the things that we've noticed within VCI, and again, you started it down in Louisiana, was, well, I guess you say, first, we intentionally made the decision within the VCI standards development process to stay out of the identity management and verification, cognizant that was an important step that needed to be handled to ensure that the right smart health cards were given to the right people.
Right.
And since then, we've noticed a number of states and territories take the approach that you've taken, that you started, which is to leverage the digital driver's license or digital state ID as the path into identification verification. I'm just curious, have you worked with any other states on that? Because it's an interesting approach that really unlocks a lot of potential other opportunities to issue these kinds of credentials.
Definitely. And, other states are implementing their versions of a mobile driver's license. Apple has their version that's been rolled out in a couple of states. We haven't implemented one for another state yet, but we've had some conversations with other states, because we're more than just the driver's license. We're more than just tapping the license like the Apple one is tap only. It shows the actual credential. It has scannable barcodes. It links to all these other state services. We can do renewals for driver's license. We're going to have vehicle registrations this summer, and you'll be able to renew your vehicle registration in the app. So it's a full service solution. And so, while we haven't done it for another state, because we've grown so much, there's a lot of states looking at us, looking for a similar solution. So that's why we got ourselves listed in the Azure Marketplace, and we're just saying, hey, look, if you're interested in what we're doing and you like what we're doing, even if you've already started implementing a driver's license itself, talk to us, because we're not just the driver's license. We start there and then grow. So.
And I noticed the match rate, the most recent up-to-date stats were 95%, which is phenomenal. Congratulations on that.
Yes.
I'm curious, what was the match rate when you first launched in May of 2021? Do you know?
I don't recall. It was still pretty high. It seems like it's gotten high, a little bit higher, but it was still probably in the upper 80s, 90s. So, and that's matched off your driver's license. If your driver's license is correct, the data mostly was pretty good. It's gotten better because there were like the cases, like I said, that had, your maiden name, or, you've changed your name, or your records, you go by your middle name and your record, says, Joe instead of Joseph, or something along those lines. And so we had a bunch of those sorts of situations, but for the majority of people, it was a simple tap one button and there's your record. It pulls it up, no problem, no questions asked.
Got it. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining
You're
us
welcome.
and sharing the update. Lots of exciting things here to come with you guys. Thank you again.
Awesome.
All right. Well, it looks like next up is our tech update next. Do we have
the slide say it is?
Dr. Mandel. All right, go ahead, Dr. Mandel.
Sure thing. So what I wanted to do with the tech update is actually a little change of pace. So in the updates up to this point, we've seen some really polished, refined, accessible, thoughtful, production quality implementations of smart health cards. So I'm going to take us to the other end of the spectrum and show you some really rough and early work. But this is all part of a project called Smart Health Links. And I'll take over the screen sharing if this is going to work. What I'll do is I'll paste a couple of links into the chat here if anybody wants to follow along at home. But I want to show you a couple of the use cases that we're thinking about that are difficult to address with smart health cards alone, but that we think are really important in the grand scheme of supporting consumer access to all kinds of verifiable health information. So just to call out a couple of the kind of pain points with smart health cards, one is that we're very limited in the size of data we can share. Vaccination records are tiny. A single vaccine, 2 or 3 doses of a COVID vaccine, no problem. We can fit those into a QR code. But even a full history of vaccine records, let alone a complete clinical summary, those are things that are going to be too big to fit into a QR code. So that's one of the limitations that we'd like to have a story for. And then the other one is with smart health cards, when you get a copy of your QR code, it's a static set of data. That QR code is always going to reflect exactly the vaccine doses that were packed into it. And that's a very useful behavior, but sometimes there's use cases where you want to share something a little bit more dynamic, like an up-to-date view of all your vaccines, or maybe any COVID lab tests you've had in the last week. Those would be examples of dynamic data sets where it'd be nice to be able to share once and then allow whoever you've shared with to stay up to date as the data might evolve. We think there's a place and a time for those kinds of capabilities. And so that's part of what we've been working on in a specification called Smart Health Links, designed to provide some more flexible sharing patterns. If you've got a pile of smart health cards that could change over time and you want to share that whole pile. So I'm not going to spend too much time on use cases. I've given you a quick sense of what's in scope. And what I wanted to do was show you a demo. This is based on an open source repository that I have hosted here. And the demo lives at demo.vaxx.link. And it's designed to be a kind of a low fidelity reference implementation of this smart health links idea. So you could think about this as maybe a state immunization registry where a patient has signed in and they've got access to the complete lifetime history of vaccines for a 5-year-old kid. So in this fictional scenario, Oliver Brown is 5 years old. He's had 23 vaccines over the course of his lifetime, starting in 2017 and going up through late 2021. This is probably too much information to pack into a single smart health card QR code, but it's a nice use case for something like smart health links. So by clicking on the health links tab here, I can create a sharing link. And you could think about this a lot like sharing an online document where, maybe you've created a Google Doc and you want to be able to share it with people and you want to share it with anybody who has the link. That's basically the model here. So if I want to create a subset of school vaccines, I can click this button to create a new health link where anybody I share this link with will be able to access a pile of 23 smart health cards representing this set of vaccine doses from different locations over a course of 5 years. Now, if I want to, I can assign a PIN to this health link so that just knowing the link alone isn't enough. So I'm going to use a super secure PIN here of 1234. If I want to, I can set an expiration time. And we've got ongoing design discussions about exactly sort of how these controls might work. But to start, I'm just going to create this link with a PIN, and I'm going to activate the link. And now I can see that I've got this smart health link created. I can share that link as a QR code if I want to show it to somebody who can scan it, or I can just copy the link to my clipboard if I want to be able to paste it into an email or a text message. So what happens is this link contains some human readable information and some machine readable information. And I'll show you an example of each. So starting with the human readable front, anybody who follows this link, and I'm just pasting it from my clipboard, can use a viewer application to actually retrieve the data inside. So let's see, checking my own record. So I'm going to retrieve the smart health link data using this online viewer. And it's not a very accessible viewer, and it's not a very thoughtful viewer, but you could imagine how this pile of FHIR resources could be rendered in a friendlier way to show me a table with vaccine doses. Right now, it's just giving me a bullet list of FHIR resources, but you can see that each of the 23 immunization resources that we looked at is represented as a different bullet in this bullet list here. So that's the first use case, is just an online viewer where anybody you share the link with can see the data in some form. But for me, the much more interesting thing is how we can use automated tools to view the data. Before we dive in there, let me just switch back to this tab here and see from the consumer perspective. I created this link, and now the link has been accessed once. So the access count has been updated, and I can see an access log associated with those retrievals so that there's some transparency so folks know when they create a link, is it being used and who's using it. So let me show you one more example then of how this link can be used. I'm going to copy it back onto my clipboard. But now let's imagine that I'm going to share it with a school nurse. And I'm going to ask you to sort of squint and pretend that this is a school vaccine administration tool that knows about smart health links. Of course, what it really is a Google spreadsheet, but Google spreadsheets are very easy to extend with some additional functionality. Anybody with a spreadsheet like this can go to the extensions menu and just add some new scripts. So that's what I've done here. I use the app script tool to create a new menu item called Smart Health Links. So the idea here is if you share one of these health links with maybe a school nurse, they could paste it into a spreadsheet by using this Get Vaccine Records feature inside of their vaccine management tool. And so in this example, I might paste that link in and use the same PIN. And now when I click vaccine records, think about this as a tool that actually understands the structured data. So rather than just showing me a table, it's going to perform some decision support. It's going to look through these 23 doses and figure out that some of those vaccines were actually combined vaccine products. So even though it was just one shot, it was a dose of multiple vaccines against multiple diseases. And it could do things like tally them up and see if the counts are meeting the local requirements for the state or the school district. The actual code underlying this demo is very simplistic. It's not a real decision support algorithm, but you could build a real one in just the same way. And so then the school nurse could click Save to Spreadsheet and have this information populate a new row inside of this table of results. So that's the way that you could retrieve the link and automatically populate information. And then these same links can be used to update data over time. So maybe there's a record from Oliver Brown last year who was up to date on a few vaccines, but also was behind on a few other vaccines. And the idea here is that these links can persist over time. You could create them with an expiration date, or you could create them to last a while. And if they last a while, then you can offer a refresh button. So inside of this tool, I'm going to click refresh. And what's going to happen is I'll get the latest and most accurate information. At this point, the PIN has been saved as part of that refresh link, so I don't need to manually enter it again. And these updated counts can be saved to the spreadsheet, and you can see kind of the red and yellow cells will turn into green cells. So that's an example of the kind of workflow that Smart Health Links can support. And if I go back to the consumer view here, now I look at the access log and I can see that my data have been accessed twice, once from the first demo that I showed and once from that spreadsheet-based demo that I showed. And if I'm done with this, or if I want to turn off this link and don't want to share anymore, I can simply click the deactivate button. And then anybody who has the link, they'll still have the link, but it won't work anymore. So that's the quick technology kind of preview. We're very interested in figuring out whether and how this kind of approach could be layered onto existing portals that support access to smart health cards. Under the hood, Smart Health Links just provides a way to share a pile of smart health cards. So we're using the smart health cards standard to do digital signatures, to attribute and verify where the data came from, to do the data modeling for vaccines. All that is out of the box, bog standard smart health cards. But this links idea provides a way to point to a data set that can change over time, and that could be larger than you can fit in a single QR code. So that's the quick technical preview. And we're very interested in folks who might want to collaborate on the design of these specs. So please reach out to me if that's something that you're interested in.
Thanks, Josh. And we're actually getting some comments here in the chat window. Would you mind sharing your contact information in the chat window for those that are interested in getting in touch with you about that?
Absolutely. I'm going to put my email, but I'm also going to put the FHIR community chat site, which is honestly the best place to reach me.
Great. And so I know for the groups that was here at the beginning, I made an allusion to this area of verifiable clinical information that we're going into within VCI now. And really, it is all about smart health links and where that will be taking us. So Josh, thank you so much for helping to plot the course and take us into our next adventure together. We're going to change the order here a little bit, and it's not closing remarks time, but we're going to invite our colleagues from Vaxis to join. So Moshe and Tim, go ahead and if you want to turn your cameras on and take it away and show us what you got.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Well, what Moshe and I are going to talk about is durable smart health cards for equitable vaccination enrollment and screening, really for all populations. Moshe, you go to the next slide. I have the slide here. We just want to give you some information here to show our ability to support large implementations, both nationally and internationally. Don't want to get very salesy on this. Large company, been around a very long time, and Barcodes is actually the company that is supplying the hardware and the software. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have Moshe talk about the solution that we are solving with this durable smart card.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Moshe Meppen. I'm the CEO and founder of Vaxis. And we started Vaxis back in 2020 in June. We realized that COVID vaccines were on their way, but that the government hadn't really devised a way to screen for those vaccinations because they weren't necessary yet. And so we combined that with the fact that there was a projected population of people who were going to be resistant to actually getting vaccinated. And we basically took an opportunity to find solutions that people could use to prove their vaccination. So we went to OWS, Operation Warp Speed, back in August of 2020. And we presented some ideas that really were ID based, because that's our core competency is in the ID space. And they presented us with what CDC was going to be doing, which was a card-based plan. So we took that to heart and we said, okay, that presents challenges. We worked on several versions of a solution really to help industry and government screen for vaccinations. And as we were doing that, VCI really took hold and became a de facto standard, which we were thrilled about. And so that provided us yet another opportunity to kind of retool our entire platform to not only comply with the VCI standards, but to actually act as a stopgap and to shore up areas where the 20% of the population who's really non-digital could benefit from the smart cards and the infrastructure that VCI was building. So the problem that we're solving is basically that the physical CDC cards today they're handwritten, they have legibility issues. Everybody on this call knows about the challenges that are inherent in the CDC cards. That's one of the methods that's used. Another method was to take the CDC cards and upload them. If you're in a church or you're in a situation where you want to have a group of people prove their vaccination status, people are uploading those vaccination cards, the images of those cards, which can be very easily and fraudulently addressed by any computer user. However, that's still not necessarily an equitable solution, because you need a printer, you need a computer, you need the tech savviness to be able to actually upload that card to a system. And then that gets us to the third method, which is basically having the barcode, the QR code issued to an individual, where they then have to use the smartphone to screen themselves into a location. That relies very heavily on tech sophistication. So there are still quite a few people who find that to be a complex method. Probably not on this call, but in the general public. And so that solution in itself, by itself, lacks a certain amount of equity to be able to address a holistic application for people to use the smart card technology to actually screen themselves. So this is how we address the problem. We created a durable smart card solution that will help pharmacies, states, and other issuers really provide anybody with a durable proof of vaccination. So not just people with a smartphone, but anybody who has a wallet or can carry even a plastic card. So it shores up that group of people. How we did it was we created an app that will print a secure and individual vaccination card on site, both in low and high volume. So low volume in a pharmacy environment where you're doing it one by one, high volume in an instance where if there's a call center, people can call in and say, hey, I need a vaccination card. The LA Wallet folks were discussing that earlier, where the people call in and actually want something mailed to them. Instead of mailing them a piece of paper in this instance, they'd be mailed a card, which is more durable. The cards are unique. They have VCI QR code printed on them for future screening. There's a security overlay that's actually printed on the card. So what that does is it makes the card durable, so you can't scratch off what's written on there. But it also allows for there to be an overlay that's only readable by blacklight. So there's a security element built into it that's not inherent in paper. All the artwork on the card. So in essence, if you add a booster or if you wanted to change a logo, things like that, those are all very easily done. And we did that because we wanted to be able to give complete flexibility to whether it was a pharmacy or a state that was issuing this, they could logo the cards themselves and make them their own. And most importantly to this project is that we're insisting that the participating issuers have to agree not to charge for these cards, because the cards themselves are meant to help the people who can afford to pay for them the least. So we don't want them to be a commodity that's charged for by the issuers. We want them to be something that people feel that they can get and utilize in the marketplace for free. So as I mentioned, it's closing the gap. So in this instance, it's allowing a municipality, a state, let's say a stadium, to be able to not have gaps within the groups of people who are entering to be able to screen themselves. So if you are a person walking into a stadium and you don't have a phone, if you're a 5-year-old or you're possibly a 95-year-old and you're either not able to use a phone or you don't have a phone, you still can be screened the same way that anybody who's using a phone can be screened. So it really does shore up that very large group of people. So I'm going to hand it over to Tim.
Thanks, Bush. I just wanted to do just a kind of a quick review. This is a solution to convert that CDC paper card into something that is secure, legible, machine readable, and I think most importantly fits in your wallet, because as many times as you fold the vaccination card, you got to do it maybe 3 times to get it to fit there. It's a complete system of software, the card printer, the cards, the card reader, the ribbons, all ready for immediate deployment. It can be integrated into any database. We can grab from any database and provide these cards. Again, we're not an issuer. We're just offering a solution. As Moshe just mentioned, with the overlay and the protective overlay, that prevents any kind of forging or copying. And I'm sure we've all seen plenty of articles online about the forging of the paper cards. And finally, as you might assume, the cards contain all the information the current CDC cards have, but can be modified to include any additional information required. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that tamper resistant. You'll see what the card looks like under a black light. And you could have, powered by Vaxxas, powered by Louisiana, powered by Oregon, you name it, on that overlay. If you can go to the next slide. We're very pleased to note that the state of Washington Department of Health is exploring a pilot with us to provide smart cards to their residents. They want to support the distribution and personal vaccination verification information to all constituents, whether it be the 20% of the population that doesn't have access to a smartphone, or the 5-year-old going to school, or the 85-year-old who might have the smartphone but might need help getting there. They're looking at this in 4 types of distribution methods. They're looking at this at the vaccination clinics and health centers. So at those, they would actually be tracking vaccinations and uploading that information as well before printing the card. They're looking at the same solution for mobile vaccination vans. They are also looking at the call centers for citizens to be able to call in, provide name and date of birth, and to be able to print those out for them and mail those out. And they're actually looking at a retail pharmacy partner to implement as well as part of that pilot. So very happy to note that they haven't decided to move forward yet, but they were kind enough to allow us to mention them as part of this presentation. And I think that's it. There's some contact information for Moshe and I, and be happy to answer any other questions.
Well, Tim and Moshe, thanks so much for sharing that. I know that this is your first time on the webinar, so thanks for joining us and really diving into a really important workflow. I know Liz had described a little bit about how Oregon is addressing an alternative printing of these QR codes for paper use. It's wonderful to see a scalable solution that you guys are rolling out with plastic cards and making these kinds of credentials available. So thank you so much for such an important part of the story that we're telling here within VCI and joining us today. So
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for that.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. Well, with that, we're going to now transition to our closing remarks, and I'll hand the ball over to Rick from California. Rick.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know we're right up at the top of the hour. I just want to recap. We heard from Dr. Anderson at the top of the hour. We have changed our name. VCI is now verifiable clinical information as a reflection of the expanded scope that we hope to achieve with smart health cards. We heard about the power of open source from Oregon with the system we originally deployed here in California, then being forked and improved by Washington, and then deployed by Oregon. There are other states who have also implemented that code for their residents, joining the now more than 24 states and districts who are offering smart health cards directly to their residents. We heard from the first state in addition to the most recent state. So we had the most recent issuer in Oregon, we had the first state from Louisiana, and heard about their expansion of smart health card support to include test results, which is outstanding and something I hope to see happen in more states. We heard from, I'm looking at my notes, we heard from Vaxxas about how they're expanding and addressing equity, which is awesome. We heard about the upcoming pilot with WHO and G20. We saw an amazing demo of smart health links. something that I think will take root and really expand access and empower patients to get access to more of their data, make it more shareable. I want to close by reminding everyone, September 21st is the next VCI webinar. If it is as news-filled as this one, we will absolutely use the entire hour. I want to thank you all for giving us your time, your questions, your interest, and the continued support of Smart Health Cards and VCI's work. It's been a pleasure to be a part of. Have a great summer, and we'll see you again in September.
Thank you so much.